Hello folks, Jonathan Milam here with 4 cornets. I've got 2 Conns, I've got an Olds, and I've got a King. Great vintage cornets, one and all. Old Special, tricolored, King SilverSonic, Conn Constellation 28A. But I'm going to start off with the very common Conn 88. They made this for a very long time. Some interesting features: if you get an older one, there will not be a pinky hook here, or as one guy said, an octave lever. Just press harder. There is also not an intonation aid for your first and third, so it does present an interesting situation. Most people would probably pull the third slide out a little bit. I don't even think this one does. It's frozen. I bought it for another purpose, but the only one that's moving here is the most important one. You got a tunable bell here. It is actually part of the bell system. And you've got this, what they call an opera button, that perfectly circular, that will move your slide up or down as you need. Okay, interesting thing here. Cornets, of course, are more conical, cone-shaped, smaller, getting larger than trumpets. So you start off with a smaller lead pipe, but when you get to the main, from I believe the second slide on at least, 0.480, that's just about the size of a valve trombone. So quite a large instrument, smaller bell, but makes for an interesting horn. Okay, I'm going to use the same mouthpiece as I go through these. Then I'm going to switch using a larger mouthpiece, much deeper. But this will give you a relatively normal, it's a Reeves 41M. Somewhat shallow, somewhat commercial sound, but then we'll balance that out with Curry's Vintage Cornet, which is a very large drill, very deep V-cup. Okay, we'll start out just playing an old gospel song, the chorus, verse, excuse me. I remember when my burdens rolled away, starting with the Conn 80A. Okay, now I'm going to go to the Olds Special. And I mentioned the Conn 80A, so many of these. Conn made these, that same basic style. They fiddled around a little with different trim and stuff, but essentially the same horn. I think they made it for close to 50 years. Long time. It had to be one of their most common horns. You can still find them commonly on eBay, Reverb, local sales pages on the internet. I think I bought this one for $35 just a few years ago with case, and I think it came with a mouthpiece. So definitely available. Now this is an Old Special. They made this in 2 models at least. They made one that was all brass, and then this one they call the 3-metal one. It's predominantly brass through the starting point of the horn. You see you've got your nickel silver balusters here. And what I think is a wonderful thing, you've got your nickel silver bell, but with a bronze tip. It's my opinion that this gives it a very unique flavor to the sound. I really think the tone of these Old Specials is very good. I don't think they started making it in the 3-metal until near the end of the 50s, but you still had the end of the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, I think, before or while Olds was still making them. So the Old Special, wonderful horn. I started buying and selling horns years ago. My son was about 7 or 8 at the time. You know, he's 22 now. So this is the first one I got, and had a wonderful time working with it. It was $99, but again, that was a few years back. Okay, the next horn, I was thinking about it earlier today. Zig Canstel made a tremendous number of horns. I guess maybe he got his start with Eldon Benge years ago, or Donald Benge at least. And then after the Benges quit production, he started Canstel Music, made a tremendous number of horns, some very, very fine horns. One of the leading influences in his life was a man by the name of Reynolds, who had worked with King when they were making this model cornet. And this is based on the Liberty model, although it does have a sterling silver bell, so they call this the SilverSonic. One of the great features of this horn is, again, you've got your little very sensitive screw piece here that will enable you to tune the horn. And if you've ever had a horn, your tuning slide, and you go to move it, if it's not really lubed well, you know, it'll jerk out 1/2 inch and then come back 3/4, you're fighting it. But boy, these, I really wish horn makers made things like this again, where you can just very much finesse your intonation aid. But again, based on the Liberty model, and Zig Canstel said this was the finest horn made in the 1900s. To his way of thinking, I've always thought that was very interesting, since he had nothing to do with that production himself. Again, this one does have the sterling silver bell, very interesting horn, great player, King's SilverSonic. I believe this is from about 58 or so. Okay, and the sterling silver bells are usually not found real cheaply, just because there's so much value in the bell alone. Very interesting horn here. Looks like a trumpet, has a trumpet wrap, or design, I guess you would call it. But Conn came out with the Constellations, I suppose, around the mid-50s or so. They actually made the 28A before they began making the 38B. So the cornet was made prior to the trumpet. And so a lot of people say this is the cornet version of the trumpet. No, the trumpet was actually the trumpet version of the cornet, which was made first. Interesting horn. Again, you've got your smaller receiver because it is a conical. It's growing as it goes through the wrap. But when you get to the bell, about a 5 and, 5 2/8 inch bell. Very nice bell. Quite a nice sized throat to the thing too. I'll have to back off a little because it just plays a little bit larger. The Conn 28A. Okay, I'll run through these real quickly. Where we're using a Reeves 41M earlier, now we'll go to a much larger mouthpiece, much breathier tone. And for those of you that like the Chet Baker-esque sound, the the Curry Vintage Cornet mouthpiece, the VC, will give you that option. Starting again with the Conn 80A. For an inexpensive horn, not too bad a sound, huh? Now moving on to one of my faves again, the Olds Special. I really like the tone that comes out, the nickel silver bell. I might have said sterling earlier. Nickel silver bell with the bronze tip. Now I find the sterling silver bells a little hard to color to a darker, breathier tone. They just seem so vibrant to me. It seems to me a little bit hard to get them sounding dark, but we'll give it a shot with the King SilverSonic. Okay, and the last horn we'll be playing tonight, again with the Curry Vintage Cornet Mouthpiece, is Conn's Great Constellation, the 28A. Four great cornets here, if we just had a great player. Hope you've enjoyed this. Love the comments, folks. Thumbs up, always appreciate it. If you're a visitor to my channel, love you to subscribe. I'm pushing just about 300 videos out. I lose track. What we need to do in the next little bit, I'm actually contemplating ordering an effects pedal. Saw a pro play recently. The trombonist did not show up. So if I understand things correctly, he used this effects pedal in 2 octaves to make it sound like there was a little more brass. In fact, the sax and trombone did not show up. He carried it all by himself. Did a majestic job. A real eye-opener. But at any rate, that's one of the things I'm looking at. And got a few other vids that I'd like to put out within the next little bit. If you subscribe, you'll be one of the first to hear what's going on. As always, thanks for watching. Take care of yourself. Have a great rest of your day.